Welcome to another episode of the Council, where we discuss how sport has gone in India has gone from a hobby to a multi-billion-dollar industry. With me today is an old friend and somebody who I look up to in terms of just how his career, the career path that you've taken, Yannick Colaco. Who spent 2 decades in the sports industry in India, largely dealing with commercial rights for cricket and media, and now is currently managing director of NBA India. Welcome to the council, Yannick.
Thank you for having me.
That's humbling for me as well. So Yannick, I think we'll what we do at the council, like I mentioned earlier, is that we want to have conversations around the industry, around the sports industry in India, and how it's constantly evolving. Because over the past 2 decades, we've seen a sea of changes, and especially over the last decade since the onset of the IPL, there's just been this unprecedented growth in the industry in India, and we want to give viewers, our listeners, and our subscribers some semblance of an understanding of where the industry is moving and why it is where it is today. So I start off by asking all our guests the one question: Yannick Colaco, do you think India is a nation of sport?
Um, a nation of a sport culture being developed. I think that's what for me the best description of sport is, in a sense that this is a nation which has got so many young consumers. It's got over 300 million people under the age of 18, and when you see the rapidness in which sports is being adopted by these young consumers, I think there's absolutely no doubt that not only that this is going to be one of the most prominent nations of sport in the world shortly, it's also going to be one of the most competitive nations in sport in the next few decades.
That's encouraging to you, for sure. So you've been in the industry now for 2 decades. What have you seen and while I'd like to kind of tap into your larger experience, I think I want to be a little more specific and say, in the past 5 to 7 years, where we've seen this really unprecedented rate of growth, what are the two things you've seen that have improved the ability for international brands such as the NBA to grow in India?
I think it's just the adoption of sport, right? It sounds cliched, but because you have this large youth population, and it's not just been the IPL. It's been tons of consumption habits that you've seen from young consumers today. The adoption, the way people are adopting sport as both a meaningful option of participation. So there are more parents and consequently more kids who are being encouraged to play sport, whatever sport that is. And the second is that adopting sport as a meaningful form of entertainment.
Right.
I think those are the key big changes that I've seen in the last 15, 20 years, where you're now seeing sport consistently being a form of viable entertainment and a form of participation and activity. So
Right.
I think that's really the key big change which is driving this adoption of sport in the country.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's also largely an example of the way NBA India itself has changed that strategy. Or when you guys came in the beginning, it was largely on ground, but now you're slowly moving towards digital and media. When you mentioned both participation and consumption, why do you feel that shift was necessary for you guys to move from largely on-ground led activation to now more activation on media spaces or media platforms or digitally?
I actually don't think we've shifted. I think there are two components. When we first started about 6-7 years ago, or about 5 years ago, we brought our ground events here, and we did clinics, we did things that we were activating within communities in metro cities primarily, because we were a significantly small operation.
Right.
We actually have taken a conscious decision to scale up our activity in the country over the last 5 years, and year on year we've scaled up everything we've done.
Okay.
For ground events, if you look at the amount of ground events that we're doing now, we're probably doing about 20 times the amount of ground events that we were doing 5 years ago.
Right.
The key difference is the audience that we're targeting. What
Fair
we
enough.
decided that we had to, when we were working on ground events, we decided that the most meaningful contribution we could make to growing the game of basketball in this country was essentially building a strong grassroots foundation. So our investment in ground events really went into our junior NBA program, where we said, let's get more and more kids bouncing balls and having fun playing the game of basketball. So we started 5 years ago. Well, we had multiple, events for, young adults and youth as well as grassroots. We started a small grassroots event, which was Junior NBA at that time, small at that time, which was in 2 cities. We had about 100,000 kids in Mumbai and Kochi, and we saw tremendous adoption for that. So that has now scaled into, over 5 years we've been through over in 34 cities. We've engaged over 10 million boys and girls, and we've trained over 10,000 PE teachers, and this is primarily delivered through ground events. So we've pushed our focus on ground events towards grassroots, getting more kids to play the game of basketball and have fun playing the game. Right. I mean, we've distributed, just last year, we've distributed something like 15,000 basketballs as part of these ground event, cones, equipment, everything around basketball. So that's really where our grassroots focus has gone to. In a sense, let's build the game of basketball from the bottom up. We've done Junior NBA, and we continue to expand that with our partners, Reliance Foundation. The next level, if you look at also in ground events, our basketball schools, which we started with our partner India on track. The idea is that when a child has fun playing the game of basketball, if you want to learn and advance your skills, the basketball schools is your after-school program, which will help you develop. And right now we have 28 of those in this country, and we're going to have 50 of those in the next 6 months. And of course, the top of that pyramid in the basketball grassroots to high performance kind of strategy is our academy, which we opened a year and a half ago. In Noida.
Right, but and thanks for clarifying that as opposed to the question that I asked. But you also, there's a very conscious growth digitally and in terms of media, right? You guys are showing more games than ever. You guys are pushing the app now. You guys, as a matter of fact, you've reduced the cost of the League Pass. I've been a League Pass member now for 7 years now, and I've gone from paying 9,000 rupees a year to now paying 1,000 rupees a year. Huge change for me as well. Why is it that important for you guys to grow from that perspective as well?
So it's and it's almost this dual. If you were to kind of crystallize our long-term growth plan, a long-term strategy, not just in India, across the world. But in India in particular, into two kind of pillars. One is really this grassroots to high performance, which I just described. The second is really providing better and more meaningful access of the NBA and our games to our fans here. So as we build fans to the grassroots, we need to provide them better and more meaningful access. And what do you mean by saying that in a sense? One is delivering live games. We're now delivering close to 350 to 400 live games on Sony's sports platform a year. We're delivering games in Hindi. Now, again, that's something specifically for the Indian audience, because there is a set of audience in this country who are not comfortable with English and not comfortable with the advanced way world feed commentators describe the game. In the form of it's more catered to co-fans. So we're trying to build, again, if you look at everything that we're trying to build from that providing access, is how does it become more relevant to our consumers here? The Hindi commentary, digital. When you talk about even pricing of our products, it's important for us to price the product according to the demands and competitive products in the market. That's the only way you're going to establish yourself as a brand. So everything we're doing here from that second pillar, which is providing better access, is we're constantly looking at the market. We're constantly taking feedback. We're constantly doing research, whether it's research by third parties, which provides data from digital, from BARC numbers, to actual market research that we commission, which actually looks at brand relevance, looks at participation studies and things like that. And we're using that obviously with case studies and with experience we have of building our brand across the world, adopting those strategies customized to the Indian market and implementing them out.
One thing and like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you have gone from selling pretty much what is a religion in this country, which is cricket. That's one end of the spectrum, to pretty much the opposite end of the spectrum, where this sport, which was, while we've been playing it for over 60 years, has been in the background for a really long time. What are some of the lessons that you've taken or you are taking from cricket and applying them to basketball? Or are there even any lessons that you can apply across the two sports?
I think you have to look at, I think the lessons in cricket that you learn is essentially, or that I've taken essentially, is getting a better appreciation for consumer habits, right? Even if you look
Okay.
at the game of cricket, when I started working on cricket in 2000 or 2001, uh, one day cricket was the biggest commercial format of cricket. Test matches were still delivering significant ratings on television. Digital wasn't really a significant player at that time as a mode of distribution. Even that has evolved so much. If you look at how the IPL, how T20 cricket, and before, if you remember, before the IPL came the T20 World Cup, which was also very successful
Yes.
among young audiences.
Yes. A lot of people say that was a tipping point, as a matter of fact, in
Right.
growth. Yeah.
So you look at the evolution of sport, whether planned or by circumstance or by luck, it has happened because of consumer demand. So the consumers essentially, for a sport to be successful, and for any multinational or any commercial brand to be successful, you have to be able to adapt yourselves to consumer demands. And it's what we do consistently across the world. It's what we believe that the game of basketball needs to do in India, in a sense that we have to react to what consumers need, and we have to build our products here, which is customized and made our product relevant to them so that they can better engage with us. And the similar in a sense, but in cricket, the key difference for cricket was cricket as a sport was already well entrenched in the community. So the category of cricket was set.
Right.
The challenge there was, how do you best engage consumers to the brand or to the product that you're selling in cricket, which was a part of the cricket product. I know when I represent the Indian Cricket Board or the Pakistan Cricket Board or Cricket South Africa or even the EPL at that time, how do you find the consumers, or how do you modify your product, package it in the right way to those consumers that you are targeting, so that you drive maximum engagement and obviously monetize it most efficiently.
Right.
That was really the goal at that point, and that continues to be the goal as people, as the demand for cricket, the cricket continues to be entrenched.
Right.
In basketball, like other sport, the challenge for me, and it's a reason why we've invested so much in grassroots in this, is that the category needs to be developed. I make this example in a sense that when you talk about sport, you look at any consumer, a new consumer category which coming in. Sports is growing in this country. We all know that. Cricket, as you said, well entrenched. It's part of the fiber of the culture of society in this country. So it already exists. It's entrenched. You don't have to do that. But if you look at any sport, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whether it's badminton, and compare that to any, whether it's the NBA or the EPL or whatever, compare that to any other multinational brand. And I make this example, which is simplistic, but it's an interesting example. If you look at a brand like Starbucks,
Right.
Great global brand, right? But if Starbucks were to set up their first coffee shop, beautiful coffee shop, great coffee, great branding, great marketing, in a tea estate in Kunur, right? Where no one has ever tasted coffee.
Right.
They're all tea and lassi drinkers.
Right.
It doesn't matter how great your brand is. The category doesn't exist in that market.
Correct.
So for you to be successful as any multinational consumer brand in India, you have to, one, help the category grow, and then you've got to be really interested in saying, how do I get more market share of that category? So today, if you look at, if we as the NBA looked at this market saying, hey, sport is, there is this market for sport, let's figure out how we're going to compete in there.
Right.
Best case opportunity for us in 10 years is you have a large share of a small market. The opportunity for us that we believe is that sports pie in India has tremendous growth potential over the course of the next 10 years. So we believe that it's us and every other stakeholder in sports, it's our responsibility to contribute to growing that pie. And as we're growing that pie, if we can keep growing our market share, great. That's really the ultimate business goal. But I think building the category of basketball is being the category of sport, and building the category of basketball is the single most mid to long-term challenge for us.
Right. So I want to pick up on something you said in the middle, which I caught on. You said you use the phrase commercial success. Now, commercial success, is depends on different people's perspective, right? How would you define commercial success for NBA in India?
So the way we've taken a long view of the market. As I said, for us, we are looking at building the game from the bottom up, and we believe the NBA brand is intrinsically basketball. So we have a responsibility wherever we build our business to make sure that the game of basketball grows significantly and the game of basketball is healthy and thrives in a successful ecosystem. So when you look at us as a business, that is our primary goal when we're looking in India. In the short, mid, and long term, we have to make sure that basketball as a sport, the ecosystem around basketball, whether it's coaches, whether it's kids playing, whether it's facilities, everything of that is developed. And we work with multiple stakeholders to do that.
Right.
So for us, long-term success is really building that ecosystem of basketball and expanding our fan base on the back of that. That's long-term success for us.
Fair enough. I think one thing I really like about the way you approach the general growth of the NBA in India is that you're not shy to taking on critics who have some sort of opinion on how you should grow your brand, as a matter of fact. And I'll admit that even I've been a critic of the NBA's work in India. What do critics of the strategy that you're using to grow the brand in India, what do they not see? What are the realities that they don't perceive as lay people that makes it difficult for you guys to tick certain boxes, for instance?
First of all, I don't think there's anything as bad criticism. I honestly don't believe there's bad criticism. I think feedback, positive or negative, is good.
Okay.
Every single, I don't, we get tons of mails, not just here, but across the whole thing, saying you should do this from people who care. I mean, the fact that a fan is writing to us saying that, hey, why aren't you doing this? Or why are you not, why are you doing this? Means they care, which is great. It's, and we listen to every single one of those. Obviously, there are, when we make a decision in terms of what we do, we use, the vast experience of basketball and the NBA that our organization brings. But we also significantly use data and research to be able to make those decisions. And every decision we make is like saying that, we're looking at long term. We're looking to scale up. We may start in a smaller way to see that there's an option to scale up. So, I mean, I'd flip that, and you've been also in sport for a long time and obviously a big fan of basketball. Like, I would really be interested to continue to hear, like, what are if there were two things that you think need to be done in basketball, what we are trying to do, right? Build basketball success and build our brand, what would they be?
Right. Oh, you're asking Yannick's flipping the interview and me.
And feedback, I think, is very important. It's really important to, and you may agree or disagree, but I think the most important thing is to be able to understand where it's coming from. And I'm serious. Like, okay, one thing. Tell me one thing if I do differently.
As a matter of fact, the criticism that I largely levied was an early day criticism, which was that NBA doing these large scale, what I would say, sportainment events, and in interest of full disclosure, I was with an agency that executed those events, like the Jam, for instance, and they never really did anything I felt for the growth of the game. I'm a bit of a purist that way, where I believe that the game needs to grow organically, which is why, like I mentioned in the first podcast, with the first council we did, I keep bringing up NBA India as an example because you guys have corrected that course. I wouldn't say corrected that course, but put that focus towards building a larger grassroots program where now, like you said, 10 million, that's 10 million potential fans, future NBA fans, right? And the junior NBA program largely caters to kids who are 15 and below, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. So in 10 years, those kids will all be anywhere between 15 to 25 with some sort of earning potential, and that becomes a massive fan base. So I think that is... For me, I don't think it's a criticism as much as I think that's the right way to go about it. And more so because I'm a purist. I think that's where it should go. I was very skeptical about, for instance, the Hindi commentary. Because yes, I mean, Hindi is not a national language, but it's a language that's largely spoken. But I've seen over the course of 3 years how the Hindi commentaries become. Like one of your colleagues, Meru, had put up a clip recently at a conference, and the evolution of Hindi commentary from... two people figuring out how to convey this game, 2 or 3 years later coming up with these crazy terms. I forgot one of those terms. It was so entertaining to put it right. And so, and thing is, you and I exchange texts all the time. I share stuff with you wherever I feel that there's some sort of a misunderstanding or I think that maybe you guys may have got it wrong. I always share texts and you've always been kind. So I think that my biggest criticism earlier was I don't think you guys are focusing enough on grassroots, which has now It's
Right.
it's complete 180 now, 360. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
and
180. 180. Sorry, 180. Yeah,
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 and I think for us, everything we're doing, right? In a new country, we obviously come with a lot of expertise, which what we've done globally. But you know, we've been here less than 6 years, right? It's
right,
all less, about 6 to 7 years. We've also everything we've done, including Hindi commentary. Commentary is a great example. When we first set it out, we literally took 4 months to kind of prep for it.
right,
We had commentators who were trained by our um, by experts from the US who flew down. There was a lot of stuff. We created this panel. We worked with Sony. There was a lot of work which was done to prepare for it. And then we kind of looked at the reason we did it was very simple. The reason we did it because we felt that, again, from research, we realized that there's this entire vast potential of consumers in this country who are basketball fans, but get lost a little bit with the regular feed that we put out because, again, it's heavily accented, at least for Indians, heavily
yes,
accented English. It's very fast basketball. While it's a really fast and entertaining sport, it can also be a little bit overwhelming to someone who hasn't really been used to it. So the first reason we did Hindi commentary was not just about saying let's put another language. It was also about saying how do we kind of readdress that and try to address basketball and the NBA in more simpler terms. So obviously the challenge with that is always when everyone says, when we're doing that, you've got this whole set of core fans who are not going to like it.
right,
So the first decision we took is we're not going to replace our core product. Our core product is going to continue being there, and we will only do this if we can do it as an adjunct to. So separate channel, simulcast, all our fans have to have that same game in 2 feeds.
right,
So that's the only way we do it, and we
Right.
do it. And we sat with our broadcaster and agreed to do a dual feed.
Right.
So every fan still has the opportunity of doing Hindi and English.
right,
And the reaction that we got initially was very positive. We had, I think, we did first at a finals at an NBA. There was a 7-game final, I think. No, wasn't it? So one Cleveland, 2 years back.
yeah, 2016, right,
So we did that. We got very good feedback. I think we had close to like 3 million tune-ins just for those 7 games, which was great. We did it last year over a course of about 70 games
Right.
last year, and again we had I think about 18 million tune-ins to that. Our overall numbers in terms of reach and stuff have seen very positive there. And to what you're talking about now, we also continue taking research. We continue doing focus group studies, continue to get feedback. And one of the feedbacks that came to us was these guys are too serious. They're being, they're talking about, they're in this box where they're
Right.
being very formal about basketball in the NBA. And we said, hey, listen, we got a lot of feedback on that. And we said, why don't we, end of the day, we are an entertainment product, right? This isn't a 12th standard lecture where someone's talking about, rules. And so we said, let's, a lot of the guys that we had on board have great personalities. They've got their people who talk about the game, have fun with it, and funny. And so let's open it up a bit, give them a little bit of leeway, and let's try a few things around it. And as you said, there's been some great response. There's been some response saying, "Hey, these guys are too frivolous," but we're going to continue tracking that. And the reality is that we don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers, but what we do know and what we will always do is make sure that whenever we are doing something, whenever we're doing something, it can't be tactical. It has to be something that we believe is scalable, has long-term strategic impact. And then when we do it, we are constantly looking at feedback. Feedback, as I said, from numbers, feedback from consumers, and feedback from actual research studies that we do. So
Right.
that's the evolution of everything that we're doing.
Right.
It'll continue to evolve.
right. I'd like to kind of bring this conversation to a wrap, Yannick, by, as somebody who, again, I'm repeating myself, but as somebody who's been in the industry for 2 decades, and now you're helming a international sports brand that's looking to create a long-term impact in India.
Right.
What are the 2 realities you would hope that change from an environment perspective in order for you to be able to create the impact that you wish to, or maybe even more than that?
I think from a sporting culture perspective, it's extremely challenging, and I'm the first one to admit it, having grown up in this country. It's extremely challenging for government, whether state or central, to deploy significant amount of resources to building sport, where there's so many other things which are more important in the short term, whether it's clean water, housing, electricity, which need to be addressed. But what I do think, the one thing that from just a sporting brand, selfishly from a sporting brand's perspective, whether it's an international brand coming to India, whether it's domestic brands growing, I think it's critical for regulation to facilitate investment in sport, investment in facilities in sport, improvement in facilities in sport. And I think it's from a regulatory point of view, the ability to drive the importance of sport as part of school curriculum, and not just basketball. I think multiple sport. I think basketball works well because it requires limited space, and it's a team sport, which I think has more impact on the positive values that you can inculcate in children. But I think inclusion of basketball in school curriculum is, I think, a critical part. And I know I've been on as an invitee on several CII sports committees, and
right.
CII has also started up this sportscom, which is
right.
They
also have something called Making India Play, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
That's part of the CII sports committee drive,
right?
And that's really the one focus that I keep, and everyone in there keeps talking about, in the sense that we need to drive the importance of sport as not just about becoming a sporting nation, but nation building. The characteristics or the values that you can inculcate into young children of teamwork, of discipline, of commitment, of sportsmanship, that you can inculcate, those positive characteristics that you can inculcate in a child are as important as proper grammar.
Right.
Mathematics and stuff is as important. I think if we can build as a across all stakeholders in sport and government, can build that into brand agnostic, right? It doesn't matter whether the NBA or the EPL or the ISL or the IPL, brand agnostic. If we can help facilitate that sporting culture development, I think that's the largest contribution that we can all make together in making this a strong sporting nation, or a strong nation of sport, as well as and that will encourage a lot more domestic and global sports brands to continue investing in this country.
Right. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I think it was sporting culture back in Abu Dhabi where I grew, which got me introduced to basketball, and I just actually at that point in time I just wanted to be one of the cool kids, but eventually I turned out to become a fan that I mean, I'm pretty big fan of the NBA. So wish you all the best of luck, Yannick. Wish you have many more Jonathans, several million Jonathan type fans for the NBA, and thank you for coming. We hope we can have you some other time again, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Yannick.
Thanks.